Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives and to part three of Undo the Coup. This one is subtitled The Cover Up is the Coup. Well, that's a little complex, but what I want to show today, I think, is the key to undoing the coup d'etat of November 22nd, 1963. So let's get started right after the music. All right. Good morning, and thank you for joining me here at McDuff Lives. I'm John O'Loughlin, and it's a Monday morning. It's very rainy right now outside, and a good day to sit inside and catch up on some reading. I got some new books I've just ordered, and going to dig into some of them this afternoon. Looking forward to studying about Heinrich Müller. I've got his volume two of his um, interrogation in 1948 by a CIA officer. And that's a book. It's in three parts. I sent away for it, and volume two came. I'm very fascinated to read this interview and detailed information from the famous or infamous Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo. And where did he end up after World War II? Well, I'll tell you when I find out. I'm going to read the book myself. Lots of stuff going on in the world today, but I want to direct our attention back into 1963. And my aspect of the coup today is to show that we don't really need to find out the name of every person who pulled the trigger on that day. We don't need to prove what went on before the assassination, except to show that persons involved in the government after the assassination knew about various things from time to time that they knew were going to happen. LBJ being one of them, and I've talked about these in previous shows. So, what I want to do is to look at it from an analytical point of view to try to prove my case. And I realize that it's an uphill battle with the prevailing narrative, but that's what we're going to try to do today on McDuff Lives. So let's start with our friends at Wikipedia. And let's just get them, because obviously, if anybody should know what a coup is, it's the people behind Wikipedia. Let's just put that up on the screen so you can go along with me. Coup d'etat. Okay, a coup d'etat, or simply a coup, is typically an illegal and overt attempt by a military organization or other government elites, underline that please, to unseat an incumbent leadership. Then it introduces a term I hadn't heard before. A self-coup is said to take place when a leader, having come to power through legal means, tries to stay in power through illegal means. So, in terms of Lyndon B. Johnson, I think we've got him coming and going. We've got him before the coup, knowing that the assassination is going to happen, and not doing anything to stop it with the knowledge that he had. And then he meets with J. Edgar Hoover after the assassination, and they talk about how important it is that the single shooter theory be accepted immediately. And they cite considerations such as the disturbance of public belief in their government, things that are kind of vague but they cite it as reasons why it's so important that we just do a slam dunk, get this investigation over with right away so that the government can keep going without the people being upset. Not upsetting the people is not a legitimate reason to cover up a coup d'etat. As a matter of fact, that's part of the coup d'etat, is to make sure that the people don't realize or don't know enough facts in order to see what really happened. A coup d'etat, an illegal and overt attempt by a military organization or other government elites to unseat an incumbent leadership. Well, we have shown the many, many parties that are interested in unseating the incumbent leadership, i.e., President Kennedy. No, we've got the super patriots. These people that. Oh, let me take that down. These people, the crimes of patriots. These people, patriotism unhinged. The people that thought that by Kennedy, through his policies, was himself being unpatriotic to the extent that he needed to be removed from office. Then, of course, you have the Israeli angle. You have the Clint Murchison and the Texas oil guys who are not going to allow him to take away their oil depletion allowance. Of course, you've got the interest of Israel in getting the atomic bomb and Kennedy's resistance to that. Then you've got the Federal Reserve people who are going to resist against him creating a national currency based upon the idea of the government controlling the currency as is prescribed in the Constitution. All of these people have got these sweet deals for themselves and the people they work with and for that are all going to be upset if President Kennedy is allowed to continue in office, and even worse, if he were allowed to gain a second term. So when President Kennedy goes to Dallas in November of 1963, why does he go there? I think it's important to realize, to just reinvigorate ourselves into that time to the extent that we see that what he was doing was trying to build up a campaign for 1964, that he was there. This was a campaign trip. He wanted to speak. He wanted to do things to help people support his reelection. And this, of course, was unacceptable to the Texas powers that be, including, of course, Lyndon Johnson. So why is there resistance to the idea that it's a coup d'etat? Well, I've already mentioned the main reason. The main reason is that the American people would get upset. They would get upset. They would say, oh my God, you can't do that. Now, I took this question to Grok this morning, and I spent about an hour and a half, if not 2 hours actually, trying to get Grok to admit that it was a coup d'etat. Well, I got somewhere with Grok. Grok admitted that we don't have enough facts to rule out that it was a coup d'etat. Well, why don't we have enough facts to rule out that it was a coup d'etat? Well, because LBJ and Hoover conspired to end the investigation without asking the right questions to the right people. But what looking at it again, to me, brings to mind the most important, I say, fact leaning against the Warren Commission's findings, and that is the magic bullet theory. Now, if you don't recall, let's just go through it. The idea was that there were 3 shots and only 3 shots that they were all fired by the Carcano-Mannlicher rifle that Lee Harvey Oswald got from mail order under the name of A.J. Hidell, and that he then later encountered Officer Tippit, who became suspicious of Lee Harvey Oswald. So Lee Harvey Oswald shot Tippit with a .38 revolver. Did they test Lee Harvey Oswald for powder traces in the famous paraffin test? Well, yes, they did. And they found some powder residue or something that they could claim tied Lee Harvey Oswald to the .38. But they found no residue on his cheek. Now, if he was firing a rifle, he would have had residue on his cheek from where he was holding the gun. Now, let's look at the bullet, the famous magic bullet. It is a bullet number, it has a number, I can't remember the exact number, but it's a piece of evidence that still exists. It's sitting in the National Archives in a climate-controlled room, apparently. That bullet was examined by the noted forensic pathologist, Dr. Cyril Wecht, W-E-C-H-T, who could not find any evidence that would show that the bullet encountered human flesh or bone in its traverse of these 7 different wounds that it supposedly caused. If you recall, it supposedly went through Kennedy and then out of Kennedy into Connolly, and then out of Connolly's body back into Connolly's body again to create actually 7 different wounds combined between JFK and Governor Connolly. This bullet was pristine. It was, quote, found on the gurney next to Governor Connolly. And the theory is that Governor Connolly's flesh wound must have got jostled or moved in some way, and that bullet just popped out of Connolly's, what was it, his arm or his leg? I don't remember, but it popped out of Connolly with nobody seeing it, and there it is, a pristine, beautiful bullet that is exactly the right bullet for a Carcano-Mannlicher rifle. And the pathologist looked at it and couldn't see any trace of human blood or human tissue. And furthermore, the bullet was in pristine condition. It had not been damaged, even though it supposedly went through bone in the case of Governor Connolly. Now, that's not acceptable, okay? It's not acceptable to have one of the world's most important forensic pathologists say, no, there's no evidence that this bullet killed anybody, even shot anybody on the bullet itself. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And of course, there are some studies that have been done that said that it's possible for a bullet to go through human flesh and not retain any of the flesh or blood that it's penetrated. But 7 times and going through bone? No, 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 no. No reasonable person is going to accept that, except that they happen to be on the Warren Commission. And the Warren Commission was convened by LBJ. And LBJ put Alan Dulles on it and Chief Justice Earl Warren on it and other numerous people that are on that commission, and they all signed off on it. saying, oh, well, yeah, the magic bullet, of course. Yeah, that's what it did. It went through 7 different uh, areas of human flesh, including bone, and didn't get dented, didn't get scratched, didn't have any blood on it, didn't have any tissue on it. And there it was lying on the gurney, conveniently for people to find it right next to Governor Connolly as he was being taken into the hospital. I don't think that any jury would accept that, given Dr. Weck's testimony. As you may know, Dr. Weck's testimony was used in a different trial to clear James Earl Ray of the alleged murder of Martin Luther King Jr. So this evidence, this magic bullet, is just a bunch of magic bullshit. It can't be. It just cannot be the truth. And yet the Warren Commission says it's the truth. Unwilling to accept this evidence from the expert, I asked, and I told you I spent some time with Grok this morning, asked them, has it ever happened before that a patient of a gunshot wound lying on a gurney has the bullet suddenly come out of the body in full and intact condition, lying there on a gurney for people to find it? Has it ever happened ever? No, it never ever happened before. This is a unique event in human history. All Grok can say is it's possible. And then where do we go with Grok? Well, then Grok, of course, is saying, well, the institutional findings of the Warren Commission are based on, their analysis, the FBI reports, the Secret Service, other analysis that was entered into the record at the Warren Commission. They say, that because that is the institution that was created by our government to investigate the killing, just the weight of it being the institution that was created to find out whether it was a coup or not, whether there was a conspiracy or not. Finding that it was not a coup and was not a conspiracy is part of the reason why Grok says that we should believe the magic bullet theory. And I haven't done this with ChatGPT or other AI programs. I just spent the time this morning because I know Grok is related to Elon Musk. And if anybody's going to help uncover the truth, I think Elon Musk would be a great person to do it. But I don't think he's willing to do it. I don't think he or Grok or any of these AIs are going to apply enough logic and human reasoning and common sense in order to show that it really was a coup d'etat. But if you go outside of the Warren Commission's limited findings, you can find lots of evidence. And I again would like to cite this book by James Manning and his work on YouTube. And it's amazing. He's only getting a few hundred people watching his videos. I really think everybody ought to give him the time to explain his case, because this is a man in his 80s who's been studying this all his life. And he shows the number of people that knew beforehand that the assassination would happen. And he shows how Oswald was no marksman. As a matter of fact, he apparently didn't even qualify as a shooter in the Marines. He also goes through a number of other of the the famous uh, theories and concludes easily that Lyndon B. Johnson was part of it. Here's his section on Lyndon B. Johnson. Yet even with all that trust, Lyndon Johnson still blamed the oil barons for the JFK murder. If LBJ did not become president, he would face an indictment. Clint Murchison was a close friend of both Lyndon and J. Edgar Hoover. His relationship with LBJ dates back to the 1948 Senate election when, the war hero Lyndon gets, quote unquote, he got a Silver Star for just being in a plane at the same time that something happened. And then he becomes a senator. Well, that doesn't happen without big money, right? So Johnson is the man that is there to protect the oil depletion allowance. And that's his function for the oil people. I asked Grok this. If the vice president, in order to gain power, takes out a gun and shoots the president, then does the vice president become the president under the constitutional succession of authority? So that, if it's a hypothetical and it's crazy, but suppose that, you're the vice president and you want to be the president. Well, you just participated in the election. You and the president are a ticket together, but you really didn't want to be the vice president. You wanted to be the president. So you said, you know what? The Constitution says I become the president as soon as the president is dead. Constitutional succession. So all I have to do is pull out a gun and shoot the president, and then I become the president. And then as the president, I can control the investigation and find, that it was the patsy, the lone nut. And that's all I need to do. I'm done. I'm now the president. And Grok is like, Grok says, the vice president would become the president according to constitutional succession. And of course, he had himself sworn in on the Air Force One plane as they're going, flying to from Dallas to Washington to go to Bethesda Naval Hospital. If the vice president shoots the president in order to become president, that's a coup. Okay, let's go back to the definition. A coup d'etat is typically an illegal and overt attempt by a military organization or other government elites, i.e. the vice president and the FBI director, to unseat an incumbent leadership. So should the American people accept the narrative in order to have closure? Well, that's one of the arguments that Grok gave back to me. I said, well, what's more important, the narrative, the people of the country accepting the narrative, or the people of the country knowing the truth? And it gave me ambiguous answers like, well, it's good to have a narrative accepted so that people can move on and make plans and do their things and believe that the government is working for them. Even if the truth is to the contrary, well, that's where Grok says, well, you don't have any proof that Lyndon Johnson was participant in the coup. Well, yes, we do. We have proof that Lyndon Johnson created the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission refused to do a proper investigation, put together a narrative based upon the limited facts that it was able to contain, and then forced the rest of us to accept what it said. Anybody that didn't gets labeled what? A conspiracy theorist. Alan Dulles' favorite words. You are a conspiracy theorist if you don't accept the Warren Commission. So look, I realize it's a terribly uphill battle to get people to actually take an interest. Because, LBJ, he has his constituency now. He has the history of the Great Society and the Civil Rights Act of 64. And there's a lot of people that are very proud of Lyndon Johnson's accomplishments as a president. However, look what else he did. He allowed the American war machine, the military-industrial complex, to take over the war in Vietnam and the secret war in Laos and in Cambodia. He allowed the dope dealing that we've read about and talked about in Doug Valentine's book, TDY, in which my dad was involved as a kind of a police type vetting person to vet the people that went on the mission to go out into the plains of Laos, the plain of jars in Laos, in order to observe and record and photograph and videotape a major drug deal between the CIA and the Vang Pao opium army. And yet, that book, the TDY book, it's not got a lot of acceptance either. It should. It's a very well told story. It's you can get it on Amazon. It's called TDY by Douglas Valentine, in which, as the author himself has identified that character he called Mr. Hammer as being actually Macduff, my dad. So it's Lyndon Johnson that allows all of these illegal activities to go on to the benefit of the co-conspirators in the coup. So I have problems seeing it any other way. And here's the benefit of it. Let's suppose that we were able to get enough Congress people to introduce legislation that would call for a renewed evaluation of the assassination and bring in people that were not part of the coup in order to investigate the coup. It's like the term self-coup. Suppose that Lyndon Johnson was completely innocent and becomes the president, but then during his president, he allows Hoover to cover it up. As president, he allows everything that President Kennedy wanted to stop to continue and grow and become a blight upon America, like the horrible war in Vietnam. And what other wars since then could have been avoided if the American people said, no, wait a minute, Lyndon Johnson, you're part of the coup, you're out. We're not going to accept you as a president. And the Congress would have to do it. The Congress would impeach Johnson because of his participation in the coup, the cover-up. And this is why I say the cover-up is the coup, because the Warren Commission consists of people whose interest it is to cover up the reality that, no, the magic bullet wasn't really magic. The logical conclusion is that somebody part of the coup just slipped this bullet onto the gurney when nobody was looking. Isn't that what a jury would find if you were confronted with this evidence? That somehow this magic bullet appears on the gurney. I don't think there's a jury that would accept that. The only way it's acceptable is because of the institutional idea that we have these institutions that we need to defer to. So I think those are basically my arguments, that there is still a coup going on. That's what presidential puppetry shows. The book by Andy Craig that we've talked so much about in the previous editions of this series, Undo the Coup. And because all of these presidents have been puppets of some entity or some combination of entities, then we have to accept the idea that these entities that perpetrated that assassination or allowed it to happen and then covered it up are not the legitimate government of the United States. Then look at the other part of it. Look at the Federal Reserve's part of it. You know, with Kennedy having introduced national currency, silver certificates. I actually have a silver certificate upstairs. My mom collected it, and it says silver certificate on it. You could trade that in for silver if you had one. But no, they wanted to have just their fiat currency, the paper currency that's not backed by silver. So now we've got currency that's worthless and becoming more and more worthless in terms of buying power, but it doesn't have any intrinsic value, because you can't take this paper and turn it into gold or silver or a basket of commodities or anything valuable. The only thing you can do with it is spend it in the US economy that is controlled by the same people. So if we want to have a government of, by, and for the people, we've got to get back to the idea of the people decide whether the government is. And we were not able to do that because of the cover-up. The cover-up continues to this day. The people that are running our government today are running it under false pretenses that they should not be. These are the powers that should not be. You've heard that phrase before, the PTSNB, the powers that should not be. And it's because we've been unable to stand up to them. We haven't had enough evidence. We haven't had enough political power to do what needs to be done, and that is to have an impeachment of Johnson. And then we need to go back and look at the things that we've done, this country has done in our names, but not with our consent. And certainly running up the national debt has been one of the most pernicious things that the coup has done. It put us in a position where we're spending a substantial amount of our national income paying interest to banks on a completely unpayable debt of 30 or 40 trillion dollars. We will never, ever be able to pay that debt. They know that. And the only thing they can do is keep doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. But every time they do that, it diminishes our purchasing power with that fiat currency. We need constitutional currency. Congress has the power to mint and coin money. Nobody else. No private banks, no Federal Reserve can mint and coin money. Okay? And that money has to have some intrinsic value. It can't just be a piece of paper. It's got to have some intrinsic value. And it should not be hoarded the way these banks do, because hoarding of the currency in order to make some investment, on the stock exchange, keeping that currency out of circulation the way they're doing right now. The banks are sitting on millions and millions and millions of dollars of our US dollars, of our fiat currency, just to keep it from circulating. Because if it circulated, then the inflation would get worse and might even bring down the dollar. So they're in this really precarious situation where they have to keep the value of it enough for us to believe in it, but not so much that it would empower us to actually enrich ourselves to the point where we could do something. The common people in this country are divided by politics, or as Bob Marley calls it, politricks. And the control of our media, the control of our currency, has all just allowed everything to go into war. And the idea that this country can't exist unless there's a war going on is actually probably pretty popular among the financial elites, because how else are they going to make money? They make money by hoarding money and then investing it in a military coup. And how many coups are there? Let's go back to Wikipedia for a second. I think this is instructive. By one estimate, there were 457 coup attempts from 1950 to 2010, half of which were successful. Most coup attempts occurred during the mid 1960s, okay, right after the coup in the United States. But there were also a large number of coup attempts in the 70s and the early 90s. Coups occurring in the post-Cold War period have been more likely to result in democratic systems than Cold War coups. Really? That's Wikipedia trying to say coups are okay. Though coups still mostly perpetuate authoritarianism. Well, of course they do. That's why they seize power. So 457 coup attempts. And why is it unthinkable that one of them happened in the United States of America on November 22nd, 1963? Let's see what you guys think. I'm going to open up the comments here. What do I think of Justice saying there's no Epstein client list? I think Mike Benz showed the Epstein client list on his show this morning, if you haven't seen it yet. And then, of course, as you thumb through it, you get to the point where every single bit of it is blacked out. Nevertheless, there is a client list. I'm troubled by Kash Patel and troubled by Dan Bongino coming out and flipping and saying, no, 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 Epstein killed himself. That's not what they said before the election. Pressure has been applied. And I see it once again. That's part of the ongoing coup that happened in 63. It's still going on. Ron Key Jason, hello Key. Ron Unts at unts.com has gone through JFK evidence and then asked AI to fact check with no grounds for complaint. Hey, Polly. Key Jason, LBJ was asked about being vice president, and he said he read history and he saw his odds. Yeah, let me fill this in a little bit more because that's another important thing. Is yeah, it's circumstantial evidence, but it's still evidence that LBJ was asked why did he accept Kennedy's offer to be the vice president on his ticket. Now, of course, we understand why JFK wanted LBJ on the ticket, and that's because of the vote of the Southerners. You know, he needed the Southern vote in order to win against Nixon. That was the whole reason. But what was LBJ's reason for associating himself with the hated Kennedys? Well, what he said was he studied history. And he said that, what was it, every 17 years, there is an assassination of the president. And that he liked the odds and he was going to play the odds. You know, how many presidents have been assassinated? Well, what is it, 7 or something? It's quite a few. And so he was thinking, yeah, well, you know, I'll do this because I want to be the president. And, you know, yeah, of course he's a young man, JFK, you know, 40 some years old, but yeah, he might get assassinated. So that's why I'm going to be the vice president, because then I get to be the president. He actually said that. And Brightmore Dinosaur, hello. And the money hoarders won't tell you about Heter Iska loans, which skew the balance. I'm not familiar with that. So here's Musk. Isn't this wild? What's going on right now is over the weekend, Musk announces the formation of the quote American Party, even though he's not an American. Oh God, the South African connections are just too many. The South African connections indicate they are a tentacle extending from that hidden hand of the city of London and the great empire behind the oligarchical families that own all that wealth. And he's exposed himself as part of that British uh, ongoing British empire. And somehow he thinks he's going to entice Americans to abandon President Trump in favor of him because he opposes the quote uniparty. Well, yeah, there is a uniparty, and those uniparty people are part of the ongoing coup. You know, they're the ones that will say, you know, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. You know, no, I don't see a coup. I know President Kennedy. You know that evil um, LBJ. I mean LHO Lee Harvey Oswald. You know, he was a commie. Well, maybe he wasn't a commie. Maybe he was a right wing nut. You know, he was an anti uh, Castro guy. You know, no, he was set up playing first one side and then the other side with his Fair Play for Cuba committee, which was an attempt to portray him as a pro Castro, pro communist uh, that became a lone nut and killed President Kennedy. Elon Musk is, as far as I'm concerned, he's out. You know, you go to Mars on your own ticket, brother. I, I don't want you in my government, Elon Musk. And I think this might be the end of Elon Musk entirely. President Trump is, let's see, talking of deporting Elon Musk. Well, that might be a good idea because Musk comes into the administration, but then he comes out as dark MAGA. And what is dark MAGA except for the uh, Palantir guys, the ones that want to impose a hidden government behind the scenes that has access to all of our data, that has a dossier on every human being in the country, if not the world, and has the tentacles extended out through things like JSOC, like things like the FBI coordinating with local sheriff's offices, and just the ability to impose its will upon us and to take out people that object. I object. I object to the continuation of the uniparty, and I agree with Musk that the uniparty's got to go. And President Trump, what he comes out and says is that, Musk is a fool. He should know that third parties never work in this country. Our system seems to be built to favor the two-party system. And right there, I think, is an important thing to look at, because look what President Washington said. He said, don't form political parties. Don't do this. The original Constitution said that the president would be the person that gets the most votes, and the vice president would be the person that gets the second to the most votes. But during the administration in which Adams and Jefferson fought after the election of 1800, they found that that didn't work. It didn't work to have a vice president of the opposite party from the president. So they changed the Constitution, said, no, the vice president and the president run on the same ticket. And that perpetuates, through that change, the two-party system. And everything since then has been to perpetuate the idea that it's two parties. Well, before the Civil War, there was more than two sometimes. But after the Civil War, no, just two parties. You can take Theodore Roosevelt's so-called Progressive Party as an exception, but generally, the rule is that this is a two-party country, and it's our government is set up to enable the uniparty by, the Hegelian dialectic of, you've got extremes on the left, extremes on the right, and that allows the people who control the system to control the outcome. So no, Elon, you have discredited yourself, and I think that what everybody ought to understand about Elon is that he comes from that South African elite that were empowered by the British elite, just like the Israeli elite were empowered by the British elite. And, to follow up on that, just look at all the work I've done with Harley Schlanger to show that it is the City of London and the financial powers behind it that have scooped up all the money around the world in over centuries and have an unlimited amount of funds that they can use to overthrow governments, to pay assassins. And as Lyndon Johnson admitted, we are running a murder incorporated. At that time he said in the Caribbean, but of course it's been expanded all around the world. So murders happen, assassinations happen. All these things are enabled by the American people's inability to undo the coup. Let's take this from Don Lavelle. I think poisoner, you mean poisoner party, able to download a lot of cash. That's right. They can get all the cash they want. Funds armies of poisoners. Invisible gel mist. Kate. Oh, okay. We're talking about now again the ability to murder people with secret means. Well, is that not the McDuff story? That is the McDuff story. My dad, having been a top FBI agent for Hoover, in 1962 transferred to the Pentagon to become part of the SACSA organization that was to take special ops away from the Pentagon, away from the CIA following the Bay of Pigs, and secure all of that into an office directly under the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. And my dad was to be one of the officers of that organization created by President Kennedy to take special ops away from the CIA. But the moment that he got appointed, he somehow comes down with hepatitis. He tells my mom that he, quote, consumed tainted shellfish, unquote. And that was all that he ever said about it during his life. Yet that hepatitis nearly killed him. It enabled people like Alan Dulles to go through all the secret files before they had to transfer them over to SACSA and to do what they could to clean up the files. It also weakened my father's immune system, which they knew that. So my dad then works at SACSA for the next, 8 years, 9 years until he dies of metastasized cancer. Well, that's the type of assassination that Don Level is talking about. Poisoners. He was poisoned, if I'm correct. I could be wrong. But that's right. Yeah, once they got, Alan Dulles collected all the poisons in the world. You know, he he had the CDC put them all together for him. Center for Disease Control didn't say the Center for Disease Elimination, did it? Brightmore says Christians killed by climate change. I don't know about that. Prester John is here. He says both U.S. political parties are economically and geopolitically extreme right. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would like to get rid of the Uniparty too. Another of the people I follow on X, I can't remember who it was, but basically said that the idea of a third party is a non-starter. It can't. The only thing it does is allow the other side to win. So if Elon started the America Party and drew a number of voters to it, the only benefit would be to the Democratic Party. It wouldn't help. It would hurt the Republicans, and it would not accomplish anything that the America Party wanted to accomplish. Instead, it would give us another Kamala Harris or some other puppet for them to control on the Democrat side. So I'm kind of thinking that he's right, that it has to be one party. that's going to fix things. And between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, I think it's the Republican Party that can do it, because the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. Lincoln is the icon of restoring power to the people. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And Lincoln's vision for America is the vision that we need to restore. John F. Kennedy's attempts to allow other countries around the world to do their own development, like America had to fight for the right to develop itself through the revolution, was part of that, although he was a Democrat. But if you look at the history of the Democratic Party, you realize it's the racists. It's very much controlled, and has been for a long time, by people like Woodrow Wilson, racist. Harry Truman, racist. So many others that rely upon the idea of one race being higher than another race. And the Democratic Party, as much as it sounds like it's egalitarian, is not. It's run by people that want to continue the perpetual war machine, the military-industrial complex. And as far as being in favor of advancement for colored people, quote unquote, or anybody else that's not, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, is a fable. What the Democratic Party does instead is create interest groups, like a group of Muslims creating their own town in Texas, the interest groups of Jewish interest groups, the interest groups of American Indians, the interest groups of women, the interest groups of Black people, interest groups. All of these things are there to turn our country into a nation of stakeholders. And you, as whatever you are, whatever, how you identify yourself, this identity politics, this is all run by the Democratic Party. Identity politics. I am a well, I identify as a certain group. The oppressed white people. Let's say I'm an oppressed white person. That's seeing our government being taken over, and just because I'm white, I'm excluded from something. These are victims. So what you create is dozens of different victim classes that can all be merged into a, quote, stakeholder. And then you just get a combination of stakeholder groups to support your candidate. And we're all divided up. It's divide and conquer. This method of divide and conquer is what's killing us. And it all goes, right through our hands into the pockets of the already elite. And the already elite are facilitating the continued effort by that oligarchical power that we call the City of London to control the entire world and everybody that's in it. Is there any other way out of this mess other than undoing the coup? If there is, please tell me. But if we were able to get our Congress to admit that the Warren Commission was part of the coup, then Congress would then hold hearings to undo the coup, to look through the legislation that's been passed under the coup government and say, this one's okay. We can leave this one, but that one there, for instance, the ending of Glass-Steagall. Who does that benefit? It benefits the coup. It doesn't benefit the American people. The division between investment banks and industrial investment versus speculative investment. The dumping of our economy into the world economy and allowing money laundering on a huge scale. All this money laundering that continues to go on is how the British-based economy continues, allowing money laundering by this massive drug industry is another thing that President Kennedy tried to stop. And one of the ways he tried to stop it was in the TDY mission that my dad was a part of. And although at the end it turned out that this mission, while successful, was also seen from the beginning by Henry Kissinger and his people, and they were able to control it so that when it was over, they were able to cover it up. We need to uncover it. We need to show what I've said since I started this show, and that is, if the American people could understand what really happened to McDuff, my dad, then you would also understand what happened to our country. Dude, where's my country? Says the filmmaker. Well, where our country is buried under 1,000 lies created by the coup d'etat of November 22nd, 1963, and those that continue to support it. And Chris Wirtz, that's my question. Why can't we open up a JFK assassination investigation with all the evidence that's been uncovered over these many years? Chris, thank you very much for putting it in a nutshell. That's our show for today. We'll see you tomorrow, and have a great afternoon on this rainy day here at Mystery Island. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and spread the word. Put that hashtag #UndotheCoup out into your social media and see if we can get some traction among the citizens of this country, who are the only people that are ever going to change what happened. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye now.